So, whether you agree with this or not, I will ask you to reflect on what this has to say about your environmental position. Because sometimes people think, well, no, that doesn't sound like me, but then afterwards, when they reflect on it, they go, yeah, there are parts of my practice or beliefs that align with there. It doesn't mean that you're stuck in one part of this either as well. People change throughout the course of their lifespan, but it is good to be kind of clear about what type of environmental ethics that you actually have. So, first of all, if you're down here in the bottom right-hand corner, dark green, ecocentric ethics. These are people who are interested in Gaia theory. They holistically defend the integrity of all species and ecosystems. They believe that everything in nature should be treated equally, and sometimes non-human elements must be allowed to win. So the different variations of this. Historically, it was called the land ethic, but the Gaia theory approach is one that that I think most people will know from a scientific perspective. This idea that because we as human beings we may pollute the planet, it doesn't mean that it's over for the planet, but it does mean that we have to kind of radically think about the way that we live about things and do things. Interestingly, we've discussed in the spirits of capitalism approach to understanding what business ethics, that businesses do change the way that they do things, and we change our attitudes to how we do things as a result of crises. So there may be positives. Gaia theory is the one that we associate most with James Lovelock. One thing that's interesting when you work with people who are within the green or the environmental movement is something I've noticed myself, is that when they talk about somebody who has that perspective, that the word deep is used, that there is an understanding that some people take the perspective of deep ecology to mean people who believe that the planet is primary in how things are done. This is sometimes called deep ecology or deep green theory, meaning that the the planet itself will sustain itself beyond us as human beings. If you're in the, there are lots of different kind of perspectives on this too as well. Lynn White Jr. Wrote a book called The Historical Roots of our Ecological Crisis, or wrote an essay on this in the 1960s. And what he was saying is, in this article, was that the ecological crisis has its foundation in Judeo-Christian religious thinking. This has been challenged, of course, hugely from within, by theologians of all faiths. But he's saying, well, that there was a sense that the world is somehow passing, that it's not important, and that our focus should be placed on the next world. It's this idea from Plato that the world that we live in or engage in at the moment, that this is just a part of this is something that is temporary, and that there's a greater reality beyond ourselves that exists in the afterlife or on another plane. That as Plato said, it's like we're like our experience of the world is we're like prisoners in a cave watching shadows dancing on a wall, and there's a much broader, greater reality out there for us to engage with. So deep green theory says that virtue ethics and all established ethical conditions are ecologically inadequate, and and that we need a new way of a new ethics that looks at in greater detail at the way that we exist as part of and within nature. Now, if you're on the left-hand side, sorry, this is hopefully it's clear to see. I think it's a little bit dark on my slides here as well. This is mid-green theory, and this is the idea that value isn't restricted fully to human beings, but it's not fully ecocentric either. It's through a process known as moral extensionism. It says that, well, okay, whatever we apply to ourselves as sentient beings, we have to extend to and give moral consideration to animals. And because animals don't have the ability to give us consent for how we treat them, it means that we, rather than farming them for food and eating them and making them work for us. That we should actually give them a special moral status and protection as a result of that. This means that just because animals are may not be, well, they're highly intelligent, but not as intelligent as most human beings. Um, and by intelligent, I mean may not have that level of self-awareness that human beings have. Because they have this inability to give consent, that means that we actually need to take care of them more. The same that we would take more care and have a duty of care to human beings who similarly may not have a level of self-awareness or an ability to give consent for how they are treated to us. Different versions of this. You've got animal liberation, the animal rights movement, sometimes called biocentrism. Non-domestication means we allow animals to live wildly, and of course the vegetarianism movement has become quite important as well. If you're on the left-hand side but in the upper quadrant, it means you're light green or environmentalist. Now, although this word insinuates a great level of care for the natural environment and for the world around us, it is still highly anthropocentric. This means that nature has a slightly more instrumental than an intrinsic value to us. And the sole value assumption that human beings alone have intrinsic value can be countered with a greater value assumption, which means that natural items have an intrinsic value. But when these two clash up together, human needs take precedence. Okay? So this means that human beings have to reflect on what it is they actually need and what it is that they want. This has been named as environmentalism, but it has been criticized as being, by people who might be deeper, have deeper green ethics or deep ecology ethics, as lifeboat ethics, that we're only saving the planet to save ourselves. It has been critiqued as resourcism, and Curry says that this creates a kind of a modern religion that puts all of creation into categories of utility to humans. I just want to mention two related positions to both of to all three of the ones that we've looked at before I look at the final one, the eco-capitalist ethics. Ecofeminism is related to both animal rights and to is related to light green, mid green, and dark green ethics. Because it says that we have to look at it's Salah, for example, saying you can't address how men have oppressed nature without simultaneously addressing the oppression of women. The patriarchy tends to identify women with nature and men with science and rationality, and women with kind of wildness or emotion or anything like that. It's completely arbitrary, but this is what these studies have shown, is that is that women are rightly or wrongly identified with nature. We hear the words like Mother Nature and it provides a rationale for the patriarchy to dominate both women and nature through a thing called a master mentality. This is to do with, a master mentality sees all life as ordered into two opposing categories, one of which is because it is better or has a greater, capacity for rational thought, is more, has a greater level of power to kind of discipline, or a better way of saying it would be is more qualified to lead other people for their own good. So in this, it constructs some values as being constructs are more valued than others, and the role of what is lower is to serve the needs of the higher. So again, rather than seeing ethical positions as being something that one person takes, or you take one ethical position, we can see that these kind of move into other spheres of interest. These move into other areas where they are where shared ethical concerns can be raised. Another one of these is green virtue ethics, and this is the idea of, virtue ethics is about this idea that we all have our purpose, we have our telos. Green virtue ethics, and I said before that one of the concerns about the relevance of virtue ethics to contemporary environmental issues is that they were written at a time when there wasn't they were developed initially at a time when there wasn't a huge amount of industrialization. But green virtue ethics says that we have to extend our concern for finding our purpose in life to finding the purpose of all of us as human beings within the biosphere that we exist. So this means that we have to get rid of previous boundaries, such as divisions between, eco-ethics, feminist ethics, and this leads to the application of environmental ethics to the business sphere. So what I mean by that is this: is that when you think about it, so much environmental ethics tends to look at capitalism and business and say, oh, they're the problem. We have this in lecture 1, where we looked at the discourse that exists about the discourse that exists about the way that businesses were seen as being the problem, the only problem in relation to the natural world, and to save the natural world, we had to do away with business concerns. The problem with that is that it doesn't sustain people in the here and now, as well as future generations into the future. The erasure or the dissolving of these boundaries makes it possible for us to think about different ways of doing business in the future, ways that are respectful of the natural world, not just respect the natural world, but which continue to make profit for businesses and simultaneously protect, conserve, and heal the natural world and other business concerns around it. This is really what sustainability, as it is taught about in corporate settings, is all about. So as a corporate concern, it tries to dissolve the boundary between capital and nature. Perhaps one of the best known manifestations of this is Adam Verbach's 4 co-equal principles for organizations. So the word co-equal is underlined there. We've looked at this in an earlier lecture. The social, acting as if other people matter; the economic, operating profitably; the environmental, protecting and restoring the Earth's ecosystem; and the cultural, protecting and valuing cultural diversity. A student in the class asked me, was it possible to, do you do this at a stage-by-stage level? Nope. The important part of it is that it is all done at the same time. This has been called eco-capitalism, eco-entrepreneurship, green capitalism. It has been critiqued as managerial environmentalism or greenwashing. But what we're going to look at in the next lecture in particular is just how sustainability is done, how we can bring it into play in the for the natural world, how it can be applied to businesses, and how they can change in order to how they can change what it is that they do in order to create greater levels of profit for themselves, while at the same time taking care of their responsibilities for sustaining societies, cultures, and the natural environment.